Over the past 2 weeks, I've been playing a lot of Fury along with Invocator to try and compare the two, see which is better. So in this video, I'll cover the pros and cons of both to ultimately help you decide on which you should potentially play. We will start here with Fury. For most content, this has been my skill setup, with the option to switch to Clay's Salvation instead of Fountain of Life, and using Janice's Rage, that giving you and your team an extra damage boost, if the healer's not using it, with then these crossbow masteries and these wand masteries. But the first pro for Fury is kind of what makes it broken, the ability to stack curse duration indefinitely. You can go to a dummy and you can continually stack those curses over the period of hours and end up dealing 5 million damage every 10 seconds, killing a dummy. So it has an absolutely broken interaction with that ability to infinitely stack the duration of your Touch of Despair. This can be abused in boss fights when you pre-stack those curses. So you have a group and imagine they're all Furies and you just tank the boss at the beginning, stack your curses, don't do any other damage, then stack those curses, and now you end up with the ability to do your curse explosion and deal 10 million damage per curse explosion and completely nuke the boss within like 30 seconds once you start using your full rotation. Doing these dummy tests where you start without having pre-stacked anything is, yes, more representative of a random group scenario which isn't going to give you some time to stack curses on the boss beforehand. But as soon as you do, you're looking at crazy amounts of damage. It requires specific setup and coordination of your team, but I don't know if that stacking of the duration is fully intended, and potentially it will get nerfed down the road by giving it a cap or just disabling that stacking altogether. And if they do disable that stacking, Fury will be lacking in single target damage. So there's always that big risk. If you want to invest into Fury, be aware there's one change the devs can do, and that can completely ruin the class. But yes, another pro is that after about a minute in a boss fight, you pretty much have the highest damage output against that boss versus any other class. Nobody can compete, and the longer the fight goes on, you will just keep doing more and more damage so long as the boss is persistent and you can continually maintain and stack those curse durations. Another pro is you have massive self-sustain. You can get away with using the Vampiric Contract to heal you and not taking this extra damage boost of Vampiric Onslaught and still have massive damage output. I can kill the dummy in 62 seconds on Fury with self-sustain, with self-heals. You can see them all popping off there. Now, be aware this setup is more for a dummy orientated, giving you that extra crit damage and a bit of extra cooldown speed, but that's also a little bit more representative of a real team because you're going to have Deadly Marker in the group and you're going to have that crit damage on the boss whenever he does a Fury attack, which is going to be most of the time. So yes, you can still do very, very high damage with all these self-sustain heals, and compared to any other class, you still have pretty much the best damage. Otherwise, you don't really have any mana issues, at least with the right setup. I'm at about 30% mana cost efficiency with half this in mana regen. It just shows that because I'm not in combat. You've got your mana exchange and you have the option to use your Fountain of Life to even give you mana back. Just be aware you need to have decent mana cost efficiency for it to be worth it. And with this, I don't have any real mana issues. So I would take that as a pro for Fury. You do have ways to regen that mana. Another massive bonus for Fury is the fact you have some incredible team support. With that ability to give your entire team 24% extra critical damage against the target, you just have to be casting that weak point shot whenever the boss does a Wrath or a Fury attack, and you will apply that debuff. You also have the ability to use like Janus Rage, giving that base damage boost to your entire team. You can even put Valorous Barrier and Enchanting Time on somebody else, but in most cases it's not worth it because you're the one doing the most damage. You may as well buff yourself. And you have the ability to run Fountain of Life, which is going to help your team with mana regen and also extra heals. You have all the other wand skills too, so you have the option to even spec into more healing. And that ability with Vampiric Contract, you can simply switch your target to a teammate and you give them all the heals. And with your Crossbow Masteries, you're giving crit to your entire team. So yes, incredible team support here on Fury. And that's with using your base kit. And finally, I would say it's a pro, you can play at medium range. This gives you a lot more flexibility versus having to play at melee. You have a lot wider area of which you can successfully play. Do be aware though, as with the Crossbow Masteries, you do kind of want to play within 10 meters of your target. Before we get to the cons, let's go to the pros of Invocator. This is my usual setup here with my Staff Masteries and my Wand Masteries. This being with that self-heal capability, which is pretty huge, along with the extra defense. And these are the staff specializations with the wand specializations. I will definitely say this is one of the most comfortable classes to play and the easiest out of them all. So if you're a new player, I would highly recommend it. Fury is a little bit more squishy. So looking at the pros, Invocator has pretty much some of the best burst damage in the game, allowing you to get like high contribution on those shorter boss fights. But again, as soon as the fight's over like 1 minute, Fury will generally beat it. You can see what I mean by high burst damage. You can beat these Gate of Infinities in 1 second. Another pro is literally never any mana issues. You have an insane skill, Inner Peace, allowing you to channel it, regenerating a ton of mana back, along with giving you that crazy amount of mana cost efficiency. So even if you're not stacking a ton of mana regen, you should not have mana problems. There is advantages to stacking mana regen to trigger Mana Ball Eruption more, so you may see builds that prioritize that more. Another pro, high self-sustain and incredible survivability. Again, you're running with a wand, so you have the ability to have Vampiric Contract. You don't need to use Vampiric Onslaught. You can to squeeze out a bit more damage, but if you're out here solo or don't trust your healer, totally just go with the self-heal. The amount of damage you give up is not worth you dying. Additionally, with the Staff Masteries, you're getting Mana Shield, which gives you a ton of extra defense, which just equates to a ton more survivability. You also have bonuses which are just going to give you a flat amount of extra hit points with the option to run this one too. And overall, your survivability is just one of the best in the game. Another pro is very good multi-target damage. If you're out there killing groups of enemies like in your Abyss dungeons, you can have a multi-target setup. I recommend this one right here with these skills. You can see the specializations here too, and the masteries can change slightly, particularly with staff, just to take advantage of these bonuses. And your multi-target damage is very good, and you won't have any problem in like Abyss dungeons or killing groups of enemies. And finally, you can play a medium to high range, which makes those boss fights an awful lot easier to play. You have a much wider area of where you can position yourself and still deal damage. But now let's get into the cons, the negatives. We will go to Fury first. There are definitely some big drawbacks. First of all, it is gear dependent. Realistically, you need to have a Queen Belandir crossbow. You will get those extra poisons, which will lead to more curse explosion damage, but also those poisons will contribute to more procs of selfless diffusion, giving you more cooldown and more weakened duration extensions. From my tests, this was pretty important. We were getting 66 seconds or so without buffs or anything with a standard boss build. And then without Queen Belandir, we're looking at like 107 seconds to kill a dummy. It is so much slower. So if you want to play Fury, be expected to get the Queen Belandia crossbow. You can of course get away without it if you are playing as like a Pacific group where all you're doing is stacking curse duration on your target. Then the Queen Belandia crossbow is not so important because yes, your main damage will just come from stacking the duration of Touch of Despair. But that requires a Pacific group who's going to basically wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the boss while you just pre-stack curses before they do any damage to the boss, which just feels like, in most cases, a waste of time. Another con is it needs good stats. You seriously need to increase the effect of Selfless Diffusion for this build to really work. You need to have at least 50% cooldown, at least 50% attack speed, and upwards of 50% buff duration. I'm already on the low end. Without these stats, again, that Selfless Diffusion will not have any good uptime and your damage will suffer as a result. You will take much longer stacking your curses, which will mean a much longer ramp up time for your damage, which ultimately will just make it not as good as versus other classes. So again, you are very heavily dependent on getting those good stats, so it's not a great starter class. Next up, terrible burst damage. Because of that requirement to stack curses, and you need some time to do so before your damage ramps up. If the fight only lasts 30 seconds, your damage is just poor. You will not have enough time to ramp up that damage. So going into those field bosses where they only last for like 30 seconds, I would not play Fury. But if you're in an arch boss fight and the lasts for like 2-3 minutes, then Fury is very good. So again, terrible burst damage. Even compare Gate of Infinity times, this is 10 seconds versus 1 second on Invocator. And then you have terrible multi-target damage with a ton of mana issues. If you want to try get any decent multi-target damage, you'll be using Annihilation Barrage Shot, which just completely drains your mana in most cases when you're trying to use Mother Nature's Protest with Gaël, with Nimble Leap, the Whirlpool, and otherwise you're just left with Curse Explosions. You'll be using a multi-target spec for it, which I just don't bother with. I have the luxury of being able to play both Invocator and Fury, so I simply switched to Invocator multi-target damage, which we just said was pretty good. You can of course make it work, but all things considered, Fury multi-target damage is very poor. And then you have terrible environment damage. In this boss fight, for example, somebody gets trapped in a Wraith's grip. Your damage is absolutely terrible at destroying those things. And in other fights, like in Calanthea, they get trapped with those orbs. You again have terrible damage to break those orbs. And that is because you cannot apply curses to those. And on top of the fact you having terrible burst damage, you need time to ramp up the damage. Finally, it requires a minimum of 90 wand mastery to function. Without this, you really won't be doing any damage. You have to have Corrupting Hit, and you realistically have to have Abyssal Burst to have any decent damage. And you can't get there without 90 wand mastery. You can see the steps I would take to get 90 points to get the Abyssal Burst. So that's it for the pros and cons of Crossbow Wand, of Fury. Now we jump to the cons of Invocator. And well, there just isn't really much. This kind of feels like nitpicking. Again, you need to have that 90 wand mastery. You ideally need to have that Corrupting Hit and the Abyssal Burst to deal decent damage with those curses. You of course can get by without. You will still do very solid damage without, but yes, you won't min-max your damage. And then finally, nearly everybody plays it. It's super popular, so the best gear for it is the most expensive. Like you want to go for that spectral set and the mask has just gone through the roof. You of course will be buying lithographs instead. But yes, this has gotten really expensive just because everybody uses it. Keep in mind of alternative sets you can use. And you don't always have to use the exact same pieces, like 2-piece Ardent can work, 2-piece Void can work. But yeah, these spectral ones, it is usually best to have the helmet and the chest or the boots. And that's why they're getting pretty expensive. there's no real alternatives to that set because of the amount of crit damage you gain. So it suffers from being popular, it suffers from being really good, and so the prices on those things have just been getting more expensive over time. But yeah, that's it. There really isn't much negative things to say about Invocator. It has just so much going for it. Super good single target damage, ton of self-sustain, very good multi-target damage, can play at range, no mana issues, and that's pretty much all you need for a good PvE build. And that's versus Fury, which has the catch, it can get nerfed at any time, it requires at least the Queen Valandia crossbow, you need some decent stats to back it up, but yes, when the stars align you have some insane damage output. You still have pretty much the best sustained damage after 1 minute in a boss fight. You have massive self-sustain and incredible team support. If you want to go high risk reward, you go Fury. It's expensive with regarding needing the Valandia crossbow at least, and again, has the risk it could get nerfed at any time. But the most reliable one I would suggest for everybody is Invocator. I made a very in-depth video recently, you can check that out in the link in the video description below. I will make a more in-depth video for Fury as I have been doing a load of tests on it. I would also say Tevent is not actually that important for Fury. Again, because most of your damage comes from stacking the duration of Touch of Despair, and after a few dummy tests, I could only get it 1 second quicker versus the Codex wand. So yeah, I'm not seeing a massive improvement in damage. Yes, the benefit is you get the cooldown speed, and you can then trait this thing, which I do not have either of these Archboss weapons traded. And on the Tevent's wand you can get 6% more cooldown, which will help a good bit more. So it's definitely still the best wand to go for, but it's by no means a must-have to play Fury at a decent level. And you will of course want to get that wand upgraded, which I will be doing so over time. And that's why I'm not trading these out, because there's zero point me trading them and then consuming all those traits and gaining no benefit when going to do this upgrade. I simply will wait till I get more of these fragments to be able to upgrade these things for free. Will just take me a few more weeks. But that's it for the video. A massive thank you to the support of all my channel members. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.